by maybe introducing our host, Helen Burrs. And Helen is one of the women that when we talk about the fact that in South Africa we only have 5% in terms of the number of women CEOs in the country, she's one of those women that we are talking about. So it's a massive pleasure for us to be here. Thank you for the invitation. She's of course the CEO and a director of the Inscape Education Group. And I'm probably going to say one or two other things about Helen. One thing that she's the initiator of the Young Designer Awards, and this is an empowerment platform for young designers. She's also the founding member of Inscape Exchange, and this is a non-profit organization responsible for funding scholarships for those who deserve them the most, but probably just don't have the means to pursue their own journey. So thank you for being here. Can we give her a round of applause? And I do want to check if you guys can hear me well, or do we need to boost my microphone a little bit? Okay, so my outside voice is not strong enough, guys, so if you can give me a bit of a boost, that would be great. Okay, and then I want to maybe jump around a little bit. Let me go to Sibu. You'll see why I'm going to introduce the youngest looking person on the panel last. But I'm going to jump to Sibu Siso Nakakwana next. She is the founder and the CEO of the Transformation Legacy. She is a seasoned entrepreneur development specialist. She's a business mentor. She's bringing over 15 years of experience into this conversation. One of the things that really upsets Lucy and that makes it hard for her to sleep at night is the narrative around the high failure rate of small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, the last I checked, I think we're still talking about 70% of all small businesses are going to fail in the first 5 years. Now, that's why she gets up every day and night, to make sure that she's changing that experience and changing that narrative. And to date, I think you've supported about 230 businesses. So let's give her a round of applause that she's doing that. And then I'm going to go to Joanna Preston. Joanna, thank you for being here. Johanna heads up the F&B Young Talent Practice, which includes the graduate recruitment and development practice teams, as well as graduate talent management. She's also the director of the South African Graduate Employers Association, and this is a non-profit that is dedicated to connecting and advancing graduate employment. So let's give her a round of applause for being here. Thank you very much. And then I'm going to close it off with Kira Cole. She's a graphic designer and the founder of Kai by Kira. She's an alumni of Inscape. She specialized in, she says that her work is about crafting timeless identities for creative brands. Now, if you're not buying that, I'm not sure what it is that you're buying. And she did a BA Honors at Inscape, and today she carries the weight of really bringing the experience for which we're trying to solve for in the world. So let's give Kira a big round of applause, please. So I'm going to start off with you, Kira, because I always believe that it's important to make sure that the voice that allows us to anchor the conversation is the voice that really fills the room first, if I can frame it in that way. So Kira, I want you to just take us back, and I want you to freely just share with us your journey. You are now an entrepreneur. You have your own business. You have clients. But once upon a time, you were here. And once upon a time, you were at least at one of the Inscape campuses. Talk to us a little bit about your experience post-graduation. How was it, especially in landing at entrepreneurship? What were the highlights? What were the lowlights?
So I think personally for me, my journey started pre-graduation. I think that always leaving the crutch of sort of being a student behind takes a lot of guts, and I think at the same time, I think that very much at an early age allowed me to learn that, like, moving from learner to earner is not moving from learner to earner, it's moving from learner to learner and earner, because those two terms are not mutually exclusive, but they rather like sort of run together, because you really are only as successful as you allow yourself to be and as far as you push yourself. So yeah, personally, like I said, I started working pre-graduation, and in my first year I started with photography, and then second year moved on to continuing that and started working for an interior design firm. And then I actually moved on to a graphic design firm, and working in those like smaller business environments, I got to work very one-on-one with the owners of those places. And so I got to learn what they did and like sort of learn from their mistakes to some extent. And I think that was really such a valuable experience in my own journey starting up, because I could see kind of where they went right, where they went wrong, and take that experience that I'd learned from their successes and kind of put that into my own thing. And that was really super helpful in my own journey. Other than that, I think transitioning to entrepreneurship is always a very intimidating situation. I think it requires a lot of commitment, a lot of time, and a lot of getting over your own self-doubt. But once you get the ball rolling and you just run with it, it almost just flows into itself. But I think, yeah, the biggest thing within it is that you'll always be learning. You won't transition from learner to earner. I think as a graduate, like, or pre-graduate, you need to see that. And then in terms of like actually applying for jobs and things, pre-graduation, when I was applying for those jobs, I found that the businesses were less focused on experience, and they were more willing to hire a junior that was super eager and willing to learn. And postgraduate, almost as soon as I got my degree and my honors, companies were immediately like, okay, cool, so what's your focused skill set? They want to know what you do and what you do well. And but they also want that eagerness and willing to learn and willing to mold, because really you could be doing the same job in a different company and have a completely different role. And so that was also very interesting. So I did apply for a ton of jobs. I was battling with whether to stick to entrepreneurship or like, you know, seek sort of that stability of just having the 9 to 5. So I applied for a bunch of smaller companies, bigger companies, and I eventually just came to a mid-sized company that I am now contracted for, so work full-time for them, but they allowed me to continue my business, so kind of do them hand in hand, and they're now sort of one of my clients. So that sort of was my journey to entrepreneurship, but I think that taking the actual jump to say, okay, I'm going to continue this and not just go into some sort of stability of like a corporate world was really a leap of faith in itself.
Thanks very much, Kira. And I want to just pause on what Kira said, because I think she's given us a lot of gems to work with. One of the big insights is that the transition is not as simple as we think. You don't move from learner to earner. You go from learner to learner and earner, which is, you know, really speaks to that learning mindset. You've mentioned mindset quite a lot of times in terms of what employers were looking for and a hunger to learn. You've spoken a lot about your experience before graduating, and it raises important questions about how early do we start the entrepreneurial journey, as an example, because with the experience of having worked for a few years and then transitioning into the labor market must have counted for something. And I think it's really interesting that you went through the conscious decision making of, am I going big business, small business, and then landing on a mid-sized business. And these are some of the things we want to unpack a little bit. So we're going to come back to you, Kira, and we're going to keep coming back to your story. But let me go to Helen for a second as I unpack a little bit more. Now, Helen, when I think about where I went to school, and I think about public institutions, and I think about the private institutions that I've had the opportunity to be affiliated with, one thing is common. They will worry themselves with enrollment, getting you in, and graduation, getting you out. What happens afterwards is kind of not my problem, is the kind of attitude or the narrative that you get. Why are we having this conversation? Why is it important for Inscape to worry itself about what actually happens to its graduates once they leave these doors?
So thanks, Nsipho. Is my mic on?
Can we have some vuma, guys? We want to sound louder.
I can't
Please,
even hear
can
myself.
you help me with that? If not, I will give her my microphone. But let's just try. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Let's do that.
Okay. Thank you. I couldn't even hear myself. Right. Thank you for that question. And I'm going to tag it onto what Kira was saying. And I'm so proud of her for saying what she said, because it means that we're getting something right. So I think we consume ourselves with preparing our graduates with skills of the future. We're constantly having that conversation. And I think one of the things that's become a key element for us is this concept of hybridization. And the fact that Kira is working for several organizations and contracting to some and sometimes employed and so on is not an uncommon story that we're hearing. And so we're preparing them. One of the challenges that we are facing more and more as the years go on, and I think it's with the diversification of our student body. And also, and when I say diversification, I don't necessarily mean socioeconomic diversity. I mean where the students are coming from, the generational backgrounds of career choice that families have been making and what these youngsters are choosing now for their futures. And the connectivity that those individuals will have when they leave us and enter into the workplace. Traditionally, when I studied some time ago, I graduated and my dad was connected. And so I got my first role because of who he knew. These days, I'll give you my son as an example. He's a YouTuber. I wouldn't even know where to connect him, right? And so these are those sort of generational issues that we're dealing with now. And so we can't rely on the family support and background to create that connection or that network or so on. And it's becoming more and more difficult for us as institutions to do that because the world has changed and it is no longer as traditional as it used to be. And so I think what we're doing is we're saying, how do we, and that divide, how do we connect with the companies and the organizations that want these graduates? They're expressing the need for these future skill sets, but we don't quite know how to open that door or how to navigate across that bridge. So, yeah.
I'm going to give my I don't know what they call it. I'm just reminded of the storybook. I think it's the conchos. If you've got it, then you can speak. So let me build on that as we try to fit out, figure out the technicals. What I'm hearing you say, Helen, is that you've got your ear closely to the ground when it comes to your students. You are tuning into what they're saying, and they're saying to you, my experience is hybrid now. You use the term hybridization, but also the reality is that traditional networks have been broken, and sometimes not even broken, non-existent, just by the nature of the student body that you have. So you've got to think differently about how do you then support them beyond the doors. So I want to maybe double click on that a little bit. When we all got this invitation, the invitation was for us to think about how do we bridge the skills gap or the skills divide. When we are talking about the skills gap and the skills divide, we heard Tulari touch on it a little bit earlier. What does that mean at Inscape? When you sit with your team and say, we're going to have this conversation about closing the skills divide, what is the common understanding of what it is that Inscape is trying to do?
So I think first and foremost, when we're talking about skills, it may not be hand to paper skills. It's a skill set. We know there's a huge brain drain in our country. We know that there's different levels of skill sets that are leaving. We know that individuals are choosing an alternative to what we know as normal employment. And so even in that employment environment, people are opting for a different solution, immigrating, semigrating. There's a lot of movement going on all over the place. And so I think it's about, it's the moving out of knowledge. It's the, we're losing a mentorship. We're losing people to continue the story. We're losing a passing on of tacit knowledge and learning and experiences and how we do things, how we function, how we role play. It's one thing to arrive with the knowledge and the theory. It's how do I build that relationship? How do I engage? How do I speak to people on different levels? It's the soft The soft skills that I think for me, it's that skill set.
And I'm going to just, before I move on, and I want to maybe just pause on what you've said. I think for too long we've been calling them soft skills. And it turns out that maybe they're not so soft after all. That you can have what we've traditionally been calling hard skills, but in the absence of all the things that you describe, Helen, what Kira has described, that openness to learning, that curiosity, that mindset, actually the technical or the hard skill actually becomes really hard to apply in that environment. And it loses its suppleness because it can only exist in a particular form. So that's really interesting to hear you articulate it in that particular way. So let me then go to Joanna. Let me come to you, and then I'll come back to you, Busi. When we think about big business, and I'm sure as Kira was sitting grappling with her decision to say, am I going to go with a big business like F&B, or am I going to go and look at a smaller business? Part of that decision making is because we know the role that big business has played in trying to help us close the skills divide for decades in this country. And so you sit in a position where you're able to, as the voice of big business in this conversation, to say to us, we've learned a couple of lessons along the way, and to be able to distill those and say, we can also speak authoritatively about what works and what doesn't work. So as we're trying to bridge the skills divide, as we want to make it easier for Kira and her classmates to transition from learners to earners, what works? What doesn't work? So if we're going to build an ecosystem, what should we be pulling in and what should we be keeping out?
Sure. Ooh, I think my mic is also not...
Oh, no, you're much better, so you can, yeah. Yeah.
Here we go. All right. I think very simple.
So I'm going to ask you to unclip it.
And just
The technical team's going to kill me, but we're going to do it anyway. And I'm
right.
going to ask you just to hold it up here.
Much better?
Much
there
better.
we go. Okay. Innovation. So I think very simply, what doesn't work is an approach of compliance. And I think, we have to own that as big business, that there is absolutely, or there has been, an element of box ticking when it comes to, skills development. And in a good way, I think, they've learned the hard way that that doesn't work because the impact there is very minimal. What does work is being very deliberate about looking outside in. So what I mean by that is, what are the skills that are necessary right now in the economy? And those change very fast. For example, in a very, very specific way, when we think technology, you can't just roll out, learnerships or training for the sake of training. Those things change annually.
Yeah.
You have to be deliberate about keeping on top of things. Secondly, you have, the learning part is 70% experiential. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
So being deliberate about having that host space where those skills that have been taught have an opportunity to be practiced. That's where the learning takes place. And thirdly, very, very importantly, it's beyond the technical skills. So it's exactly the conversation we've just been having now. It's those skills of collaboration, of creativity, of critical thinking, communication. Again, I think it would sometimes fall by the wayside because, excuse me, they would be called the soft skills. So again, paying attention to those 3 points definitely shows the impact versus the old way of just ticking boxes.
So what I'm hearing, can you guys hear me much better now? Thank you so much, team. So what I'm hearing you saying is that if we're going to build an ecosystem that works, these are the ingredients we've got to throw into the boiki. You're saying, don't bring box ticking in. So if you're going to come with an attitude of box ticking, leave that to whatever we've been doing before. This has got to be fundamentally different about wanting to make a real impact in the lives of young people, reshaping our society. What I'm hearing you saying is that it can't be navel gazing. So we can't go, oh, okay, this is what we think the labor market needs, and then let's train in that regard. We actually need to go out, constantly be in the labor market, listening in to say, what does the labor market need? And then take that outside in experience. And then you take us to the experiential element. So learning, from what I'm hearing you saying, is that it really needs to be experiential. We learn by doing. And then finally, we've got to close and maybe change this conversation about the hard and the soft skills, or at the very least say we need both in equal amounts. So we've got the ingredients to the boiki. We're still building this ecosystem together. We're still trying to cook this thing together. So Busi, let's bring in small business into the cooking that we're doing here. And I'm going to ask an unfair question, but I think one that might be at the top of all of our minds. When I introduced you, we spoke about the failure rate of small and medium-sized enterprises. We said 70% of them are going to fail in the first 5 years. My question to you is that, can small business contribute anything to this boiki? Can they be worrying themselves about creating employment opportunities for young people when they are still dealing with survival as one of the key things that is the most important for them? That's the question I want to put to you first.
So I think in reality, small businesses do not have the capacity.
Can we hear Busi? Okay, Busi, I'm going to get in trouble, but go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in reality, small businesses do not have the capacity to worry about skills development.
Yeah.
When they themselves are worrying about the day-to-day issues of trying
Yes.
to grow and build a business. However, it is ideal for graduates to work in a small business,
Okay.
to grow their skill set. Because in a small business, they can grow beyond their speciality. They're getting exposed to different areas of the business. They're getting hands-on. They're helping that business owner to build this business. So they're getting exposure to multiple functions in a business, which is growing their skills, right? So it is ideal for any graduate to be exposed to working in a small business to really fast track the growth of their skill set. However, they would need support. If small businesses had to do this effectively, there is support that's required so that the business is not worrying about the amount of time they're having to take out of their own business to now build, and transfer the skill to this graduate.
Yeah.
And they're not worried about how much they're going to have to pay their graduate. Because as a small business, the main thing is, how do I get resources? How do I manage the minimal resources that I have, and how do I maximize them?
Yeah.
So those are the things that they're worrying about. So I think if it's going to work, there needs to be some sort of support that small businesses get so that they can expose graduates to the skills that they need.
I think one of the most important things you've just said, if it's going to work, and I think that's such an important way of thinking about things. It's about saying what needs to be true. And what I'm hearing you saying is that given the fact that there's such deep potential in small business to offer a broader range of exposure, broader range of skills set exposure, hands-on experience, because the business is smaller, the young person is touching more things. But you're saying if it's going to work, we've got to imagine some sort of support that the small business would get in order to enable the small business to participate in that meaningful way. So we're still building. So I feel like we've just put up a very important shaft in this building, or put some garlic and ginger in the boiki, which I think are core ingredients if it's going to taste right, right? So we'll come back to that. But Helen, I want to tap into your imagination for a second, because I think for Inscape to host this conversation, you must have a belief somewhere that this is possible, that it can work. What do you think we would need to change about the way we've approached skills development as a country, and who needs to do what differently in order for us to cook this pot and to build this house together?
So,
Yeah,
now on.
that's 3 apologies now.
Okay. It's okay, we're learning. We're
Yeah.
learning. Okay. So, the way we do it now, we graduate, we create a portfolio, we put together a CV, we go onto LinkedIn, we look for what jobs are out there, we make an application, we attend an interview, and we hope for the best. And how many companies do we apply for with?
Tons.
Tons. Tons of companies.
Everyone that has an opportunity.
Everybody that puts out an opportunity. And that process in itself is limiting because I may or may not have something on my CV that you like. I may have tenacity, like Kira had, which I can't put on my CV. I may have those touchy-feely soft skills that would be quite cheesy if I put on my CV, right? And so that process, and perhaps it is a tick-boxing process, a box-ticking process, a box-ticking process that we go through, which creates walls and blocks and rather excludes people than includes them. So instead of stopping at a point, that end point of graduation, if it is that, and saying, right, my next step is to go through this process, how about we overlapped? Instead of joining these dots, what if we actually let these dots run past each other? And business came into the learning journey, and the learning journey went into the business, and we started to really understand at the ground and the truth behind what business needs and what's actually going on in a learning environment. And somehow we try and create the overlap and not the bridge.
Yeah.
Let's bungee jump from the one into the other and back.
I almost wish we had somebody drawing this conversation as we would speak. There's poikies, there's bungee jumping, there's all sorts of things. But I think that's just absolutely incredible because we have seemed to box the experience. As you've said, it's very sequential. You do this and then you do this and then you do this and you do this and you're saying, well, what if we actually brought in what's on the outside and brought it in? What's on the inside took it out and really blended those worlds a little bit more. What might happen then? So Jan, I have to come to you, right? And I want to bring into the room again the contributions from Busi in terms of what she believes needs to be true. The bungee jumping from Helen about blending the outside and the inside and bringing learning into the business, taking business into the learning journey. And I want to ask, maybe prefix this by saying, traditionally, when we've thought about the relationship between big business and small business, we think about enterprise supply development programs, we think about, other forms of procurement, and maybe even CSI to some extent. How would the relationship between big business and small business have to change if this ecosystem were to work where small business brings its strength, big business brings all its lessons and its strengths. We take business into learning. We take learning into business. Public and private institutions are key players in that. And young people are able to feed into this is what we need. What would need to change in your view for us to build this thing?
I think a couple of things, some opportunities that I think everyone needs to make in a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
I think traditionally Talari, I think, mentioned earlier, there is competition for talent, right? A war for talent. And small business is on the losing end. If we're looking at it in a very simple way, that could be one perspective. But actually, what we all need is talent, and we all need to contribute to building that talent, and we all have a role to play. Another thing that maybe not everyone recognizes, how many times have you heard big business complain, oh, these graduates, they don't want to keep office hours and be traditional. No, they yearn for this great space that small business has to offer, this agility, this one-on-one. How do we get creative in creating a business case of actually together growing the skill set? Because both have something to offer. Not to be naive about it, of course, big business has the salaries and the perceived stability, but it's in the interest of big business for small business to exist and thrive. So that whole idea of we're not just hunting for talent for ourselves, but we're helping to add value to the same pot from which we're going to both benefit. And also, when you look at it from a more almost, I suppose, graduate perspective, they want both, right? They want that amazing experience of being in a small business environment, but they want the paycheck and they want the stability in big business. And I think there are some very creative ways that neither has explored yet. And I think this is why we need to have more of these kinds of conversations to really think beyond just the area of skills development or the area of business development. Get the two together. Get creative, get innovative. How do you actually start that journey earlier, right? So while you're studying, how do you find time to actually get skills?
Yeah.
By spending some time perhaps with a small business, but instead of being remunerated, you're getting bullet points on your CV. Or where is big business supporting from a sponsorship perspective, perhaps? We're going to sponsor small business to be able to host some graduates that we don't have capacity to host. They develop the skills perhaps we can leverage of, but let's have more than we need. And then we share the surplus with small business. Lots of different ways, but I think it's shifting perspective. Not competition, collaboration.
I'm seeing a lot of nods in the audience as you're saying that. And I think what really gets to me is now the possible configurations, right? So we're starting to talk about what about sponsorship? Where big business sponsors someone to be in a small business. We're talking about, getting that one-on-one experience because you're in a small business environment. So let me ask an unfair question. I wasn't prepped to ask this, but Joanna, I'm going to ask anyway. One of the things that Busi kind of alluded to was she used a very, politically correct word, which is support. Is there a world where big business financially supports small business to do this? Could we see, is there any possibility that we could see some configuration of something like that happening?
I believe so, but with everything, it all lies in the business case.
Yeah.
So I think it's around getting some really smart people around a table and figuring out the nuts and bolts of, how does it work for both. But confidentially, I'm aware of some programs that already exist that actually even have, the government arm in that ecosystem where there is this fantastic, collaboration between small business, big business, government, and graduates being sponsored. So.
Yeah, because the money question cannot be left out of the equation, right? We cannot, because it's going to be important. So thank you for indulging me. I want to come to the audience. Before I go to the audience, one final question for you, Joanna. You are a thought leader in the coaching, mentorship, graduate development space. And you've spoken about, experience in small businesses. You've spoken about, the advantage of agility. You've spoken about the one-on-one. Do you see an opportunity where small business really then also gives structured coaching and mentorship as part of that experience, and that a young person would get in a small business environment? And how can big business, with the muscle that you've built in this area, support that? So we're building both the hard and the soft skills, as we've been saying.
I think definitely, and I think it's again part of that broader conversation of building talent. So again, just tapping into non-traditional ways of thinking about that. I think we can be very linear and everything is just sort of a spend in a specific direction, but tapping into business leaders in big business who have a passion to mentor and develop talent, but perhaps it doesn't have to be in the traditional corporate way.
Yes.
And expanding that, or perhaps tapping into thinking of mentorship in a slightly different way. Mentor is someone who's developing themselves as a leader, building that into leadership development programs and expanding that beyond an organization. Lots of different creative ways of crossing over from the typical HR space into the small business development space. Again, it's in the interest of big business to help small business thrive. It's all part of that bigger ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, because I think it allows us to come full circle a little bit in terms of the different ingredients that we were looking at. What I want to do is maybe I want to go to the audience. Let's take some questions, and then we'll come back maybe with some closing comments from each of you. And then, Kira, I'm also keen to hear, what your advice is to big business and small business and private and public institutions, because we're using you as a case study, so we want to hear your voice as well. But let's open it up, and I do want to just get a hand up at the back. If we've got any questions and comments online that you can share with me at the moment, do let me know. And I just want to come into the room for now. Questions, comments, reflections. What's sitting well with you? what's resonating, what's not sitting well. I see a hand, ma'am, so let's take your hand. I see another hand, and I see one at the back as well. Let's I think I might have to give up my, okay, we've got another microphone. So ma'am, if you can just raise your hand high, there it is. And as you share your question, comment, reflection, if I might invite you to please just introduce yourself so that we know who's in the room. We'll take all three, and then if there's a fourth one, we'll take it as well, and then we'll come back to the panel and get an opportunity to respond to those. Please go ahead.
Okay, absolutely. Can you hear me?
No, we are not hearing you. I think you might have to come and steal mine. If you don't mind. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Tech team is in trouble tonight.
Tag teaming with the mics, right?
All right. The name is Tsolofelo Mngadi. I work for the Transformation Legacy.
Can I bring it closer to Lucas? I think the people at the back, okay, I think
Better?
that, yeah, much
Okay,
better.
Awesome. Tsolofelo Mngadi, I'm the company anchor at the Transformation Legacy. So, I've been fortunate and blessed enough to experience big business and small business. And I was literally that case. Graduate, LinkedIn, just apply, whoever had vacancies. And then I was fortunate enough, to join a graduate program with a big business for, just under 10 years. And coming from that, I definitely see, coming from that and stepping into small business, there definitely is, something that can support the business case. If, graduates can ideally start at small business. I'm with a small, it's a growing organization, the Transformation Legacy. The amount of skills that I've also just been exposed to and gained, I did not get this much exposure in big business. As much as I was able to move around different business units, but in terms of that one-on-one, that skill set, invaluable. So definitely big business, small business, there needs to be that synergy, collaboration, and support small business. For instance, maybe even before graduating or from grade 11, grade 12, learners start working at small businesses. If small businesses can be subsidized by big businesses or government, so that the learners get, those technical skills as well, because definitely the soft skills are there, but they also need to be, developed, groomed, so that they grow as well. So I think that's, a plan, a solution. Start, at small business, and then we're able to then go and apply those skills and knowledge with big business. And because money is important, those young learners, even graduates, we need to survive as well. So definitely that financial support is definitely needed. So yeah, that's my input. Thank you.
Tulu, thank you so much. And I mean, one of the things that, you've touched on, which we haven't really spoken about, in addition, as you're applying for all those interviews, and then it says 5 years experience, and the opportunity here to begin to close that by saying, well, actually, I mean, to Tulu's point, if you start at grade 10, grade 11, by the time you have something underneath your belt to show for it. So that's an excellent part of the Poiki that we want to throw in that we hadn't really thought about. And I love the synergy and collaboration. I think, Joanna, you will agree with that. You spoke about less competition, more collaboration. There was a hand right here in the front. I'm going to ask us to pass the same microphone. Where is it now? Let's have your hand up so they can see you. And then, Madam, I see you right at the back. Please go ahead. And just please introduce your name as well.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Malipedi, and I really love...
Can I ask you to go higher, Malipedi, so that one's at the back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I have so many questions for everyone, and I call myself a graduate advocate on LinkedIn. I get bashed so much for the posts that I make. One of the posts I made was that businesses take advantage of graduates by paying them so little, and I've seen this in companies I've worked for, where graduates would be brought in and be paid 2,000 rand per month. I mean, how does one live? How does one come to work every day to get 2,000 rand? I mean, that for me, it's for you, Joanna, because you are a graduate
development specialist.
Yes, in F&B. What's the conversation around compensating graduates fairly? Exactly. So that goes to you. Again, here's another thing. we're talking about Kira, who is now an entrepreneur, right? Who started off as working for a big company or a medium-sized company and then moved into being an entrepreneur. But now, how is she getting jobs as an entrepreneur from F&B? Because now F&B is going to be saying, you're a small fish, we want so-and-so, we've seen so-and-so in the market, he has 20 years experience, you have 1 year experience, how can we trust you with 10 million? I mean, you guys just changed a logo now. Did you trust Kira with that? No, you didn't. You went maybe for somebody who's big. I'm not saying we shouldn't give big businesses a chance, but how are we bridging that gap to say we still want Kira to do big stuff for us? I mean, I know of an institution where they are calling on people to come and submit their tenderers. I'm a quantity surveyor, so I speak in tenderers. So they're calling them to submit their tenderers, but they're still grading them with the score that would grade ACOM, that would grade Turner and Townsend, that would grade these big firms. And now they can't go in because there's a red tape. So how are we maneuvering around that red tape and say, okay, one, we're compensating graduates what they're worth. Two, how are we now trusting them with big business? Or maybe not even like as big, but how are we trusting them with that?
Yeah.
So that's my two questions. I'm going to come back.
Malapeti, thank you so much. So we'll come to those questions, but I think they're important, and it might be a question of regulation. So I'm going back to my own experience. I remember my first job was 2,500 Rand per month, and that was I won't name the government department, but that was at a government department. And so I was basically, working to get to work every month and actually not making any money, but I was working for the experience. And so you end up financing that experience for yourself. So I think it's an important question around, might we think about regulating in this ecosystem? Would we need to regulate how much graduates would need to be paid? But also a very important question around, what about the young entrepreneurs who don't have the multiple years experience of big tenders, but have the hunger to learn, have the creativity? How do we make sure that we are gradually also increasing the size of the opportunities that they're getting? So I think there was a hand right at the back. Can we get the same microphone to the, Madam, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Deboheng Mokalaka Fleischman from the University of Pretoria. My question is to Kira, as our case study and a recent graduate who turned into an entrepreneur. In your experience, at what point or level of your studies, whether it was at basic education, high school or university, do you think that the curriculum could have played a role in cultivating those skills that you needed to, as you transition into an entrepreneur? So basically, how responsive is the curriculum from, very early on at basic education? And another question is, I missed the voice of industry, of government, because government plays a very important role in terms of making sure that we have a skilled workforce. So I think I missed the voice of the government, and what are the plans? Because we as university, we do produce the graduates. In a way, we align our graduate attributes to what the industry needs in terms of the boards, the councils, our advisory boards. But I just also felt that maybe we needed a voice of government to say, how are they coming into the party? Because I think that tripartite collaboration between industry, higher education, and government is very important to close this skills gap. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So a question for Kira around, at what point do you think it would have been really useful to get, through your curriculum, more exposure to some of the skills that you found that you needed? But also maybe, I love the second point, so let me do a quick scan. Anybody work for government in the room? We're not going to grill you or anything like that. But I just wanted to, anybody work for a government department? We're not going to ask you about the 2,500 rands or anything. Was that a hand? No. So we don't have government in the room, and I think that's an important observation, because I'm quite certain, and Helen, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong.
But the idea is not to leave public institutions on the outside, but it's to say, how do we get private and public, plus big business and small business working together? And so maybe one of the follow-up conversations needs to be, how might we onboard the voice of public institutions so that this ecosystem is really fully representative of all the players that would need to be on it. So before I go back to my panelists, I just want to do a final scan around the room. Yes, oh, okay. Okay, so we're going to go straight at the back. We're going to take those two. I'm notating all the questions, so I'll have them for you. And then we're going to come to you. So we've got two at the back, one here, and then we're going to come back, and I see you as well. Okay, please go for it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Kutlwano Malete. I'm the head of digital and design at 9Tix Media, and I'm an Inscape graduate, 2019.
Class of 2019 in the house, clearly.
I started my business in 2018, second year, and my business has grown to the point where I need a junior now. So I wanted to ask Helen specifically if Inscape will be more proactive in making it easier for businesses to get access to your third years and your honor students so that we can onboard them for more hands-on internships and junior positions.
Fantastic, fantastic contribution. You said your name was, sorry, I missed it.
Kutlwano Malete.
Good one. Thank you so much. So that's to Helen. More access for business. Beautiful. It's exactly what you were proposing earlier on. And then I think there's a gentleman not too far. Please go ahead, sir.
Evening. My name is Patrick de Jong. I actually work at Inscape. And some of the notes I took is that learning is mostly experiential. I love the way that Helen does that by inviting students at Inscape to follow her around and actually learn from her for a day. But if that's the case, then perhaps one of the answers to bridging that skills gap is to retaining the skills we do have in our business in order to teach the people within our business. And I know one of the most transformative years that I had in business was when a manager said, "What do you want to learn?" And they set aside an hour every week to teach me how to manage people. And that really taught me a lot. And at that time, I remember 25% of my role was something I volunteered for in that business, right? So I wasn't paid for that. I had to do all my work and this additional role that I took on. But what that did was it helped me understand, how do I build a business case? How do I motivate a change to a large organization? And would it not help us if within a big business, we adopt the model of the company Kira is contracted to say, well, if you have a business idea, bring your business case to us. As long as we feel it is profitable, right? And there's no measure to profitability of it. Like Google will reject a business case unless it earns more than $100 million a year, right? They can find a great business case to earn $50 million, but they'll say no. So if the idea is profitable, why not partner with that staff member to say, we'll help you build your business. We'll have a forum where you can come and learn the skills of running a business, write the business case. We'll work with you until you get it right. And once you are successful as an entrepreneur and we have a share of your business, so we get some return to that, then you are now on that committee to teach the next generation of entrepreneurs which come through our organization. Would that not be a way, perhaps, to bridge this gap?
There's multiple ways. Patrick, thank you very much. So I love what you've said, and I just want to lift it because on one of the things you've said is you've raised the question, what do you want to learn? Imagine if that was the question we were asking all the graduates coming into the workplace. What do you want to learn? And then using that as a way of then allocating which big business, mid-sized business, or small business gives you the best learning opportunity in that particular space. I love the idea of the 25% volunteering, so you're building some real skills outside of your focus area, but also, I think, Patrick, we call them intrapreneurs. This idea of cultivating entrepreneurs within the business rather than letting them go. So we're almost having, Joanna and Busi's world colliding beautifully and blending beautifully with those people with an entrepreneurial spirit actually becoming entrepreneurs in big business as well. So final question, I'm going to take the lady in the front, and then if, Sipho, if I've got any questions online, I'll take one question or comment if it's come from online. Please go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Kolofelo Mashoko and I'm a development specialist. Mine is more of a comment, and maybe within the comment lies a question. So I work specifically with high school students and university students in order to focus on their personal development to help them get into the careers that they want. So a focus of that is around career choice and to get an understanding of their aspirations. What I have found during that process is that often a lot of careers are glamorized, right? And so what happens when you over-glamorize careers is that you get an oversaturation of students or graduates getting into specific roles, and they're all competing for those roles. So when you compare the investment banker to the one who actually might not necessarily have or is even passionate about investment banking, but because it has a greater status versus being a plumber, which maybe they're really good at, you realize then, this is also part of the challenge of responding to bridging the skills gap. And so how do we, I think for myself, I've often questioned, how do we remove the glamour from certain careers? I mean, it's the same with institutions, right? When you're a graduate, you look for the F&B versus the smaller business, right? Despite having the smaller, I think Tsulu alluded to this earlier, despite having the opportunity to learn so much from small business, I was also in that position where when I did an internship during my studies, I learned skills that are beyond what I even expected versus when I got into a bigger company. The skill, you're very boxed in terms of the kind of roles that you're able to do. And if you're not the kind of person who puts up your hand or is courageous enough to say, hey, can I do something outside of the scope of my work? So this is why for me then the personal development aspect is so important. And even for scholarship students, why it's so important, because a lot of the time it's students who might not have not necessarily afforded the opportunity to be able to study in those institutions. And so that personal development aspect really is important because it helps them deal even with an imposter syndrome at an early age. And this is why the focus then for me is really on the high school students transitioning to university. So for me, it is around that. How do we deal with that? Like over glamorizing certain institutions versus saying, let's focus on the skill sets that we need to do versus the institutions that we're at.
Kulu, thank you so much. I'm literally smiling as you're saying because I'm thinking, as I'm processing your question, that I wonder if it's all about de-glamorizing or whether it's doing a better job at building better brands about the things that we don't think are important. That don't attract people, because one of the ongoing conversations on the continent right now is that how do we sexify our agriculture? Because everybody looks at agriculture and thinks, I don't want to be a farmer, I want to be a tech startup, this and that. But actually the opportunities in agriculture are plentiful, but we've done a really bad job of reimagining the brand of agriculture. So I'm saying, Joanna, I know there's a lot of glamorizing that goes in the war for talent, right? Everybody's got to say working here is the best. So maybe we don't de-glamorize, but we bring more spotlight to the things that are often forgotten. Anything online before I go back to my panel? No? So I'm told that online we're getting lots of thumbs up and agreements.
I think there was one more question
there
here.
was one more question. Yeah. Did I miss someone? Yes, I'm so sorry. So let's get one more question and then it's back to the panel. Go for it.
Sorry. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just have a question for Kira.
Yes.
Okay. Again.
And your name is?
I'm Shanice.
Shanice.
I graduated at Inscape in 2015. So the question that I have is, did you start your own thing because of difficulties getting into bigger agencies? Or, was it because you said that you applied to like hundreds of places and I can't remember if you said that you actually worked somewhere, and was it a specific reason that you started to, do your own? Because I've noticed that there's so many people in the creative space that's now starting to do their own things, starting their own businesses.
Yeah.
And that's simply because in the bigger agencies, it's not as hopeful anymore. It's not as dreamy anymore, or what. And we've received such an authentic education here. The inspiration that we get versus when we are out, it makes us want to start our own things.
Yeah.
And then that's a difficult thing on its own, but that's my question. Sorry.
Yeah, Shanice, I think it's a brilliant question. So do you, was your experience starting your own thing because it was so hard to get into big business or other types of businesses? Or, was it just a continuation of a love that you already had? So I'm going to try and play all of these out. Helen, I'm going to start off with you. And the questions for you really were the questions from, I just want to make sure, there it is, from Kutlwano. And this was around, could we do more to give business more access to your students at an earlier stage while they're here? She mentioned specifically third year and honors year students. What are your thoughts on that? And then maybe if you could also comment for us on, as we take the seed forward, what are your views around making sure that the voice of government is in the room? Your thoughts?
It is so good to see so many, I want to say older alumni that have come back. I really thought we were going to have staff sitting in front of us tonight and it would be a rent-a-crowd situation. So I'm loving the range of voices in the room, which is incredible. So thank you everybody for showing up. And it just, I think it amplifies for me how important the conversation is and that people actually take this subject matter seriously. So I think, first of all, I've got goosebumps. So that for me is amazing. But Rana, you will be so excited. So we have got so many initiatives that are going on that I can tell you about a few of them. Project 81. I'm not sure if you did Project 81 when you were with us. Yes, you did. It has been reimagined completely. And there are businesses that come in and facilitate that week. And so I don't want to go off onto what Project 81 is and so on, but it's really a space where students are engaged in 1 week, 24 hours a day, just about solving for problems for the world out there. Wow. Okay, so that's the one thing we do near the beginning of the year, and it's first and second years. We have another thing called 48-hour brief, and I can't tell you how many 48-hour brief letters I've signed off in the last couple of weeks that I'm going to actually raise it at Exco and say, Dr. Sue, please can the academic team and the deans take that over? So this is about industry coming in. They provide a problem that they have in their business environment, and our students have 48 hours to solve for it. Wow. The students love it. The businesses receive plenty solutions which they can pick and choose from, and we've had repeat customers, so it's obviously working. What I would like to do is commercialize it.
Yes.
I would like business to sponsor, and that money then goes into scholarships. So I'm calling on business to come and be part of the party there. In-service training is, I think, something that you mentioned. So that's in the third year. We have a great relationship with our hosts, and I think we've got almost close to 1,000 hosts now that we interact with. We get wonderful reports from them. One of our key indicators for success at Inscape is job readiness, and the job readiness of our third year, final year students is high, and we're very, very proud of it. With this repositioning that we've been going through, this journey that Tulari alluded to, with sort of aligning with circular economy and sustainability and all those very important things in the world at the moment, part of our repositioning has been to reimagine what our mission is. What is our purpose and what are we really here for? And so our new mission is ensuring that every active participant is work ready, life ready, society ready, and challenge ready. And that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing business saying, how do these graduates come in and are challenge ready? How can they take on the day? I hear Kira saying, I had to be life ready. I had to figure this thing out. And it's the messaging of things like tenacity and perseverance and grit that we're constantly having with the students to get them ready. And I love Shanice's comment about I had an authentic education at Inscape. Yes. And that's what it's about. It's about being authentic. It's about building those relationships so that when these graduates go out there, they're strong and they're brave and they can put that front foot forward and they don't rely on what's on their CV. Yeah. But they have all the other soft skills that go with it.
CV plus.
CV plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this. Work ready, life ready, challenge ready, society ready. And that's just really, really incredible. Thank you for sharing that vision with us. And of course, we were watching this commercialization of this project because that is absolutely brilliant that you're already doing it, but the question becomes, how do we scale and how do we make it even bigger? So that's really exciting. So Kira, let me come to you next. I'm going to start at the end with Shanice's question.
Perfect.
What was the driving force behind doing your own thing? Was it just really difficult with all the applications you had made to get into big, mid, small business? Or was it just about following your passion?
So I think really for me, my motivation behind applying for a bunch of jobs was more stability than not being able. I think like I knew I could do my own thing, but what financial stability does that come with? None. And what experience am I gaining if I'm just sitting alone with myself? So having the opportunity to now work remotely for like a mid-sized company, I'm still gaining experience from like working with people, but I'm still having the opportunity to run my own business and take those skills and actually apply them in some way. However, I do 100% agree with you. I do think that that is the reason that a lot of creatives end up starting their own thing. And I think a lot of creatives struggle to find somewhere that they can actually be creative, because I think once they get into these jobs, it's like, okay, so here is your set of collateral that you work with, now put it together in 5 different layouts and like do that for the next 10 years. And I think like when you're in university, especially like she said, like the authentic experience we had here, you're always being challenged to come up with new things and to think really outside of the box. And you almost don't want to lose that skill by being put in this environment that's boxing you to stay here. And something that you guys touched on with the working 25% volunteering, I must say the company I work for, like a lot of the times there's so many people that have started in positions but actually moved around within the company because they actually listen to kind of what everyone is where everyone's looking to go. So we've had like a content writer that's now like the manager of HR and like things like that, where if you listen to what people are passionate about, I think businesses will be so much more successful, because if someone who has passion is in the position, like they immediately have that driving force behind it. But yes, just to go back to the question, I do think that is the reason a lot of creatives do end up starting their own thing and freelancing, is because actual jobs just become really mediocre, and it's not, one, probably challenging enough, it's too cookie cutter, and then they think that, rather having your own thing is much easier to be creative. And as much as it is, it does come with a lot of grit and like pushing through and a lot of things. And I think that maybe contributes to the thing of like people maybe have the want to do it, but they don't have that like will to carry on and like fight through to get to that position of like, okay, this is going to be a thing, whether the rest of society likes it or not. I am making this a thing. It's not like, will this be a thing? Like, you're making it a thing.
So I'm going to come to Debogo's question next, but I think you've just said something so important. So one of the things that Busi had wanted to speak about, she said, Nozi, if it's possible, I do want to talk about the different places where young people can go if they want to start a startup or an SMME and they don't have the money to do that. Because they might have walked the journey you've just described, Kira, of saying, I actually want to start my own thing. I'm actually not attracted by what I'm seeing in big business. But then you've got this big stumbling block that says, I don't have the startup capital. So maybe, Busi, very quickly, listing off one hand, what should we be Googling? Just to put it in English.
So I think one of the most challenging things for a startup is to get capital, to be honest, especially when you're starting out and in the first few years of you operating your business. But there are a few organizations that do provide funding for startups. So there are development funding institutions that you can go to. There are venture capitalists. I know that there's an organization called SEFCA. If you want access to venture capital funding, you can go to that organization and ask for advice in terms of how to get access to that. Because the traditional form of funding, which is the banks, is difficult to get. But the two options, there's a whole lot now in the market, but it would be difficult for you to get funding. You need to prove, how you're going to actually generate money. You need to have a bit of credibility. You need to have a feasible business case for you to do that. But those two options are readily available.
So, Busi, thank you for that. So, Kira, I want to come back to you because I think Busi's comment speaks directly to the comment or the question from Debuko, which was to say, if you were to now reflect in hindsight and think about your journey through primary school, high school, tertiary, and think about at what point might have been really useful to get exposure to some of the skills that you realized that you needed when you got into entrepreneurship. When do you think it would have been useful?
I certainly believe that to a certain extent, like children should remain children. That's really such a short part of your life. So I really feel
so no
maybe,
balance sheets in primary school.
Yes, definitely. Like I think you need to live out that life because once you hit postgraduate, it's really just like live, eat, work. So we don't need that. But I think like in terms of like when, I think perhaps as teenagers, I think teenagers are very curious people, and I think like when you're in that phase of your life, you are extremely willing to learn.
Yeah.
It's just about having the right people, and I think that's why a lot of times we find when like kids are in high school, they do better at the subjects where they like the teacher more because they're just more willing to try at it. And then sometimes they become better at those things, and that's the reason they go into it. Like often you'll hear someone say, oh, this teacher's the reason I'm doing this today. And I do feel like at a sort of high school level, people are prepared to start you are prepared to start sort of exploring your own talents and your own skills. And I think if some sort of, experiential sort of education could be incorporated and you already know sort of what alternative jobs out there and what things are there, not just, accountant, this, that, like the very traditional glamorized positions. I think that people would discover so much, teens would discover so much more skills that they didn't know. For example, I didn't know graphic design was a thing when I was in high school. I think on the week after I came back from a trip back, I discovered graphic design was a thing, and I was like, damn, I actually don't want to study architecture. This is what I want to do. And I'd just fallen into the whole architecture thing, and as much as I think I still would have been super passionate about it, I definitely think this is more for me. And then looking back on it and what I did in high school, from the moment I had a tablet, I was making layouts and playing with text and all these things. And if I had known that was some sort of career, I wouldn't have wasted 20 hours, interning in architect just to be able to apply to, UP to be able to go do it. Maybe I would have, actually spent that time and already have started my journey at a much younger age. So maybe some sort of exposure to alternative subjects, alternative skills is something that could be, incorporated in more secondary education and sort of then followed through to tertiary education.
Was architecture glamorized for you? Was it one of those things where growing up you're like,
you're kind of creative, you have mathematical skills, architecture.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. So let me then, let me come, maybe Joanna, let me come to you, and then Lucy, I'm going to close off with you with some. Malapedi raised two things. So she was raising the experience of, shared experience that I had as well of, getting paid literal peanuts, just enough to get to work for the month. Do you think we need a little bit of regulation around how much we actually pay graduates, and what does that look like in South Africa right now?
So gosh, I don't know what corporate would pay that little, certainly not the one I'm exposed to. I think it's not a simple yes or no. So here's the context. There are graduate programs and there are skills development programs. They're structured a little bit differently. When it comes to graduate programs, it's absolutely a war for talent, and there is a very business approach to looking at what is the market paying, make sure we're competitive to attract top talent. Skills development programs, it's a different slant. The structure of those is often there is specific funding allocated by a CETA, for example, and now you have to split that funding into the actual training part as well as the remuneration part. And that's what gets considered. And I think out of that overall funding, there is a stipend versus, and it's stipend, not salary. That's I think the difference. But yes, the stipend has to be reasonable enough, like you said, to survive in. And I think from the consideration there is you get X amount of funding. Now you have to decide, do we pay X plus compared to other companies per learner, or do we bring in 100 more learners,
Yeah.
but we have a slightly lower, stipend? And that's the balance that gets considered in those kind of programs. So I don't think it's not a case of greedy corporate. It's really just understanding there is a finite funding, and you have to figure out how you allocate it between helping as many people as possible, but understanding what is fair for someone to be able to sustain themselves as well. So I think regulating that will probably be tough. There is more of a commercial angle to that to understand what the market's doing.
And I think it's very important in the context of a country with a very high unemployment rate, right? So where the emphasis is on trying to absorb as many as possible.
Absolutely.
And so that's how you end up with stipends instead of competitive salaries. But of course, the conversation that we're opening it up is, what impact does that have on that young person when you don't even have, enough money to go and look for another job because all you have is that. So I think it's important. It's such an important conversation for us to seed forward, and a beautiful question that you've left us with, Pulu, that you're leaving us with, Joanna, as well. And then not to the logo. So I know you use the example of the logo, but how do young entrepreneurs get a bigger slice of the procurement pie, if I can call it that? What would need to be true for us to realize that?
So I think it's around, again, proportion, right? So where you have a small business with a single person running it, they have to be proportionally matched to the job at hand, for lack of a better word. So it's the whole, shooting a mosquito with a cannon. You have to have the resources to be able to develop on a specific job. So again, I am talking out of my area of expertise because it is procurement. Where I can maybe talk to a little bit is the concept of a business marketplace or a business ecosystem. So for example, in a space where a corporate has a lot of businesses that they support or they have in their ecosystem, it's about having access to the bigger dogs in that ecosystem. So for someone like yourself, who is maybe a sole proprietor, to be able to connect with a medium business and partner and collaborate, and together you can then have access to those bigger, opportunities with a corporate.
Yeah.
Because, that's really the way to go, is to be able to create that space for partnerships. I think that's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, and I think that's excellent because it would need to be very intentional, that matching of the young entrepreneur to more established entrepreneurs in a commercial sort of joint venture, so that they're able to access those opportunities and experience. And again, I'd love for us to throw that into the poiki and to say, this is one of the things we would imagine could be possible and true. So, Busi, let me come to you with two questions, and then we're going to begin to wrap it up. I just want your reflection on Pulufelo's comment around the glamorization of certain careers, and whether you think that, the kind of opportunities within small business end up being missed because they don't come with the investment banker sort of glamour. And they sometimes might look like hard work dressed in overalls, as the saying goes. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that deters graduates from working with small businesses, it doesn't come with the brand, right? You wouldn't know a small business at the same level as an F&B and ABSA and all these names. And people want to be associated with good brands, with brands that are credible, with brands that they've known. So there's definitely like an opportunity. I like what you said earlier about an opportunity to put a spotlight on the benefits of working in a small business, just to take people away from the brand perspective, because people want to be associated with the brand. So that's one aspect that we could do differently, just to get more people working in small businesses, because the benefits are plenty. I mean, there's a few people in the audience that have mentioned the type of exposure that you get in working in a small business and how much it accelerates your skill set.
What do we change at that career choice moment? Because I remember, I think it might have been, now I'm going to reveal my age, but I think it was at grade 10, where you going into grade 10, you have to choose your subjects. And if I, when I reflect on it now, I mean, it was the most arbitrary thing. I did not know at that age what I remember choosing home economics over accounting because I was like, I like to eat. And that was my decision-making matrix. And that's how I ended up, doing home ec instead of counting in accounting. So what do we change in that conversation in the classroom that's going to impact the pathway of whether young people ever get exposure to opportunities in small businesses or not?
I think entrepreneurship should be part of the curriculum from high school onwards. And I also think that young students should learn, and actually every single individual should know how to generate income. Because if you know how to generate income, then you can navigate your way through different industries and through different technical skills. So if you've got the knowledge, so let's say you've graduated from Inscape, you've got the knowledge in graphic designing, then you know how to turn that knowledge into value for somebody else that can pay for that. So we need to get people at all levels, and especially starting early on in high school, to know how to generate income, just the basics. How do you generate income? How do you take an idea, a concept, knowledge, a skill, and turn it into something that somebody can pay for?
Yeah.
So for me, if you could do that, then you're giving people options, because we want to move away from graduates waiting and searching and the anxiety around, am I going to get a job in the right place? Do I work for a small business, for a medium size, for a corporate?
Yeah.
They must have options and choices. And knowing how to generate incomes gives people options. They can choose, okay, I start a business. Or actually, I want to work for a corporate. Or no, I want to work for a small business. Because they understand the idea of entrepreneurship and how to turn knowledge and anything into value.
Fabulous. So I think it's a beautiful place. Yes, we can give Busi a round of applause. I think it's a beautiful place to close off the conversation, but I'm not going to let you go home so easily. I'm going to put you on the spot. And I want us to think about how would you complete the sentence? And the sentence starts off with what if? And you can complete your sentence. Now, we're going to put up this on a billboard outside Inscape with Tulari's approval, right? So it's going to be our big what if billboard, and it's going to speak to the opportunity, it's going to speak to possibility, it's going to speak to the conversation that we've had here. So now remember, now Helen, you're in education, so it's not a thesis, it's not a dissertation, it's a billboard. Want to make sure we'll get that right. It's not a business case, Busi, Joanna. It's not a, it's literally a billboard. So no more than 10 words. And the sentence starts off with what if. Now, what tends to happen now is that they all avoid my eyes, because that's typically, please don't ask me first, right? So Helen wants to go first. So we'll go with Helen first, and then Kira will go with you last. So you get to take us home. So we're going to keep our pattern. So Helen, what's your what if? What if?
What if Jacques, the CEO from FMB, was a lecturer in one of my classrooms?
Yes. What if, Joanna, you've got your work cut off for you. What if the CEO of F&B was a lecturer at Inscape? Now, Busi, what if? And she takes off the microphone like you need to hear this, right? What if?
What if a graduate on one of your graduate programs spends 70% on your graduate program and 30% in the small business that we work with, therefore getting the benefit of having exposure to small business and exposure to corporate?
It's becoming a sentence, but we've got it. Let's give her a round of applause. So, what if we could give graduates the best of both worlds? 70% in big business and 30% in small business. Beautifully said. Joanna, what if?
What if we innovated skills development completely?
Lovely. What if we innovated skills development completely? I almost feel like there's a question mark and then completely and an exclamation. Absolutely love it. Let's give her a round of applause. Okay, Kira. What if?
It's a big one. What if graduates, big businesses, and small businesses all realized they played an equal role in solving the problem?
Lovely. What if we all realize that we all play an equal role in solving the problem? Now, to close us off, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm going to say thank you. So if I can just ask, whether you're at home watching online, wherever you are, or whether you're in the room with us, join me by giving a resounding round of applause to our panelists, please. A resounding round of applause. You've been absolutely fantastic. Tulare, the proposals for the billboards are coming. And to close us off, I'm going to ask you to stay on stage so that we keep it seamless. I want to invite the Dean of the Built Environment, Esther Martins, to please just come and share some closing thoughts, reflections, as we begin to close off. And also just to say to everyone, you're most welcome to network after this, so please don't rush off. But to Esther for now.
Thanks, Nozi. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Sure, I took a drive all the way from Joburg because I live there, but it was a worthwhile drive to be here, to learn and to grow with all of you. Kira, you shared about going from learner to earner, but what if we went from learner to earner, learner and earner? And I think that's so valuable and what Inscape is about. If you've ever sat with anybody from Inscape, you'll hear about lifelong learning. And it's key. It's what we do. So thank you so much for sharing and for living that out as well as a graduate. I think it's a good testament to what happens here at Inscape. A big thank you to Helen and the team who put together this today. I think if you were here on campus earlier, you would have seen it was just movement. There was movement, and now there's chairs and there's snacks, and it's amazing, and it's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for doing, and for you, for being here, for sharing, for being a part of the conversation, for giving input. I think it's really left me as an academic with really good questions to go back and think about what is happening in our curriculum. How are we preparing our students, our graduates, from first year? When they come in from high school, how do we make sure that by the time they leave? And I think that's happening already, but now we've got fresher questions to go back. So thank you. I hope you can go and enjoy the snacks. Go and ask the panelists and moderator questions. Nozi, thank you. I don't know, I think we all need Nozi in our meetings because they would run so smoothly. She'd be like, I hear what you're saying. So what you're saying is, it's absolutely fantastic. She's been amazing. So please go engage, ask yourselves questions. You heard some names of people. There's somebody from Tux over there. There's a great, I want to go talk to all of you guys. So please don't rush off. Have a conversation, have a drink, have a snack, and get the conversation going. So please don't stop now.
Thank you. That's it. You can go.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I think we did it. We pulled it off. Your team's been phenomenal. You know what? It happens, you just go with it. The most important thing is the content was absolutely fine. Do you need a picture? Okay. Yes, yeah, thank you. Can I just...